All right, Sawati Ka. Hello, my name is Sarah. I study journalism and communication at UNC. I'm from Greenville, North Carolina, so I'm in the same state as you. My parents come from North Carolina and the country Thailand, and I am planning to study in Thailand next year. So I'm going to be talking about Thailand today.
Ni hao, my name is Cynthia. So at UNC, I study journalism, French, and creative writing. I'm from Cary, North Carolina, and both of my parents are from Tianjin, China. And I actually went to third grade in China, so when I was just a little bit older than you guys know. And I'll be talking about China today.
All right, I want to get started by just get us thinking a little bit, think about what we might already know about Thailand or China. So I'm going to need Miss Barsanti's help if she can call on people when they raise their hands. I'm wondering if anybody can name any foods that come from Thailand or China. I have one more question. Are there any kinds of foods that you guys eat with almost every meal? It could be a kind of fruit or a kind of vegetable. Let's eat some good food. I am already getting hungry and we have barely even started. So I just want to ask one more question. It might sound like kind of a silly question, but is it bad when people are different from you? Have we learned that yet? We all look different. We all speak different. Even in our classroom, we might come from different places. We might even speak different languages when we're at home. So it's not bad when people do things different from you or even when they eat different food from you. So I just want us to keep an open mind about the foods that we hear about today. And I feel like some of you maybe think sometimes that there's a food you definitely won't like. Have you ever tried a food and then you end up liking it even though you thought you didn't? Now, I want to know if you guys know anything specifically about Thailand. So on the next slide, I have a question. I want to know if you guys know where Thailand is. So up there, I have A for Asia, the continent of Asia, and B is South America. All right, so we have a little bit more for Asia. We'll find out in a little bit where it is. On the next slide, I'm wondering if you have an idea of what utensils they use in Thailand. So utensils are the things that you use to eat your food. So A is fork and spoon, which we use over here a lot in the United States, and B is chopstick. We'll find out in a second if you guys are right or wrong. And then on my next question, I want to know what flavors you think are popular in Thailand. So A is spicy, B is sweet, and C is both. Right, good. Let's find out. So on the next slide, I have here a map. So we are all the way over there where it says Atlantic Ocean, where we are in North Carolina. Thailand is all the way across in Asia. It's that island that's kind of tall, that's bigger at the top, it gets skinny down at the bottom. That's Thailand. So that is a pretty far ways away from here where we are in North Carolina. So Thailand is a country in Southeast Asia. So good job if you thought it might be in Asia. Their flag is red, white, and blue, which if you guys know about our flag, those are similar colors that kind of look similar. So we have the same colors that they have on their flag. The official language that they speak in Thailand is called Thai. And there on the corner, those are some of the letters. So that's what the language looks like. It's a very pretty, kind of curvy, decorative language, especially if we're not familiar with reading it all the time. Thailand is led by a king. So that's pretty different from where we are here. Here we have a president, right? So over there, they have a king, and you have to highly respect the king in Thailand. And in Thailand, the most common religion is Buddhism. So up there in the top corner, that's a temple. That's where some people might pray in Thailand. So over here in North Carolina, something we might pass a lot might be a church. See a lot of churches on different roads. But in Thailand, they have a lot of temples. So that's a little bit different. All right, now we're going to talk about food in Thailand. So I'm going to start with fruits. You guys might have seen some of these before or tried a few of them, but I'm willing to bet that there's a lot that you haven't. So on the top left, I have mango. That's what the mango looks like when it's cut in the middle. Usually the mangoes in Thailand are yellow. Can you raise your hand if you've had mango here before? Yeah, do we like mango? Mango is one fruit in Thailand that they have there that's popular that we also eat over here sometimes. Sometimes it looks like a different kind of mango, but mango is really popular. Up there, I also have coconut. Those are coconuts, even though they're green. It's just kind of a different kind of coconut, but coconut is another fruit that they have in Thailand that we might also eat here a lot. Over on the right, I have two different fruits that look kind of similar, and they actually are kind of similar. The one on the top is called lychee, and the one on the bottom that looks kind of hairy, that one's called rambutan. They have both kind of a red skin or peeling on the outside, but when you crack them open or peel them open, they kind of taste like a grape to me, and they feel like a grape, but they have a seed in the middle, kind of like a cherry. So that's another fruit that you might have in Thailand, and they're very sweet. In the middle, that one is called mangosteen. I've never had mangosteen, and we don't really have those over here in the US unless you find them at the Asian grocery store. So I've never tasted them, but I looked up what it tastes like, and it's a combination of banana, peach, and citrus. And citrus kind of means fruits like oranges. So that sounds really tasty to me. I don't know about you. And then the last one we have over there on the bottom on the left, that one is called durian. That is a fruit. It's a big fruit. It's a little bit bigger than your head, so it's a big fruit. When you open it on the inside, it's yellow. And this fruit is kind of controversial, which means that people disagree about it a lot. It's actually known as the smelliest fruit in the world. In Thailand and in some other countries in Asia, you actually aren't allowed to bring it on places like buses or in places like hotels because some people think it's so smelly. I've never had durian also, but I've also looked up what that tastes like, and it's been described as diced garlic and caramel poured into whipped cream. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but on the next slide, we have a video where some people are going to talk about durian. All right, so he said it smelled like old cheese, but we saw a lot of people that liked it, right? One man said that some people could eat it with almost every meal. All right, so now I have two things. One thing is a vegetable. The other is part of a plant, not quite a vegetable or a fruit, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. One vegetable that's popular in Thailand is Chinese broccoli. So it's actually not Thai, but it's really popular in Thailand. It's a little bit different from the broccoli that we have here in the United States. It's a little bit more like spinach once it's cooked. Has anybody had spinach here before?
Christian gets there.
Yeah, if you like spinach, you will probably like Chinese broccoli. It's in a lot of different dishes, even in Thailand. And then on the right, I have banana leaves. That's not actually something you would eat, but they use it to cook a lot. So inside, they'll pack up something like rice or like meat and vegetables, and they'll cook it inside there. And it gives it a little bit of sweetness in the food. So some really common ingredients that you'll have in Thailand are Thai chilies. These make food really spicy, and so they do like spicy food in Thailand. A lot of people do. The second thing is coconut milk. Coconut in general is also just a really popular flavor and ingredient in Thailand. I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but my mom went to the Asian grocery store yesterday, and she got me some of these Thai coconut rolls that I love. So they're kind of like cookies, but they're they're coconut flavored. And so that shows you how popular coconut might be as a flavor in Thailand. And it looks a lot like something we'd see in the grocery store, at least the packaging does, right? Like a bag of cookies. And then on the far right, I have rice. So rice is going to be eaten with almost every meal in Thailand. You can have it with breakfast, depending on what you're having. You can also have it with what you eat for lunch or dinner. So rice is really popular. All right, remind me how many people thought utensils, the utensils they use for fork and spoon in Thailand? How many people? All right, well, the utensils they use in Thailand to eat their food are forks and spoons. You use the fork mostly. Yeah, are we a little bit disappointed? You mainly use the fork to put your food in the spoon. So actually what they use more than anything else is the spoon to eat their food. You don't use knives a lot just because it's expected that the food is already going to be in bite-sized pieces, so you don't really need to cut up your food. And they only really use chopsticks if you're eating food from China or Chinese food, or maybe if you're eating noodles, but you don't really use chopsticks in Thailand at all. Some things they might eat for breakfast, some are similar from what you might eat for breakfast and maybe a little bit different. One thing that's pretty common for breakfast is rice and a fried egg, which is also called an omelet. So this is something I've had for breakfast. My grandpa likes it for breakfast a lot, but that shows you that you can eat rice with pretty much any meal, right? And then another thing that might be popular for breakfast is donuts. So those donuts look a little bit different. They don't have to be a specific shape, but they do also eat donuts sometimes for breakfast in Thailand, which is something that we might eat here for breakfast. All right, so these are some traditional meals you might have in Thailand. The first one is actually one of my favorite Thai foods. It's called pad see ew. Pad means it's cooked in a pan, so it's stir-fried. And then see ew is a kind of sweet soy sauce. So this dish has like a sweet flavor. It usually has some sort of meat like chicken, but you can also not have meat in there if you're vegetarian like me. In the middle, we have Thai green curry. Curry in general is really popular in Thailand, not just green curry. Curry is popular in other countries as well. You might hear curry when you're talking about a country like India. So it's not just Thailand where curry is popular, but that's another dish where you might have chilies and it can be really spicy. But curry just means it's a mix of spices. So you can have all different kinds of curry. You can have curry that's sweet. You can have curry that's spicy. The green curry is a little bit in the middle, so you get a little bit of both. And then on the far right, you see fried rice. Fried rice is like regular rice, but you cook it another time and you add in some yummy vegetables, sometimes carrots or celery. You might also add in little pieces of meat to give it some extra flavor. But fried rice is just another way to cook rice that you might have in any of your meals.
The Thai green curry is my favorite one, Sarah. That's what I always order when I go to a Thai restaurant.
Yeah, I like Thai green curry because it's a little bit in the middle. It's not quite the spiciest, but it has just that little bit of kick.
Yeah.
So for drinks that are popular in Thailand, Nam Yen is one. It's a flavored and colored milk. So it's like milk, but what you see there in the bottle and in the little glass next to the cup, that's syrup. And so it's kind of like the syrup that you might put on a snow cone if you've ever had a snow cone. It just gives it some color and some extra sweet flavor. And so that's really popular with young people or with children. And then on the right, I have Thai iced tea. So raise your hand if you've had iced tea here before, or sweet tea. So we have a lot of people who've had sweet tea here, right? Maybe from Bojangles, or maybe from another restaurant. Maybe you have it at home. So Thai tea is really similar. You make tea by boiling the tea bags in water, and then you add the ice later once the tea is cooked. In Thailand, what they add is sweetened condensed milk. So that gives it kind of a creamy texture, or kind of a creamy flavor as well. And it also sweetens it up a lot. I think that Thai tea kind of tastes like chocolate milk in my opinion. So if you ever have Thai tea, you need to tell me if you do too, because some people don't think that's true. But I think it tastes a little bit like chocolate milk. All right, do you remember what fruit we said earlier you might have in Thailand and we also eat here? Yeah, mango, yep. So a popular dessert in Thailand is mango and sticky rice. This is another one of my favorites. All you do is you cut up a mango and then you have it with rice. And sticky rice is cooked in a different way. And so it is literally sticky. And so you could actually kind of mold it and shape it because all the rice sticks together. But it's usually cooked with coconut milk, so the rice is really sweet. And so you just eat it by eating the mango and the rice together. And then another dessert they might have in Thailand is shaved ice. So this is basically like a snow cone like we might have here. And so they just have shaved ice and they pour over some of those flavorings, kind of like the flavorings that I showed with the milk earlier that they would put in the milk. Just gives it a sweet flavor. Sometimes they top it with sweetened condensed milk, which is also really sweet. And sometimes they put things like fruit or candy on top. So somewhere you can get one of those. You might get a snow cone from a snow cone truck. You would get one of those shaved ice desserts at a street food cart. So that's something that's a little bit different from what we have here in the United States. Sometimes you might get food from a food truck here, but in countries like Thailand and a lot of other countries around the world, street food is really popular. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten food from a food truck. Yeah, a few of us.
Yeah, quite a few.
Nice. So basically, street food is like if you had a ton of food trucks lining up and down the road, but instead of trucks, they're carts. So instead of big trucks, these people just have carts where they'll cook the food, and then you can buy that on the street when you're shopping or when you're doing errands, whenever you're hungry. People really like the street food because it's easy to get. You can get it wherever you're going. It's really cheap. You can get a lot of things for way less than $1 from street food carts in Thailand and in other places around the world. But it's also really tasty. So there are people who cook street food who have won the kind of awards that really famous, highly trained, really expensive chefs would get. These people get the same kinds of awards. So on the next slide, we're going to watch a video. This video is about street food all around Asia, so it's not just about Thailand, but it'll give us an idea of what street food is like in general, what the culture of street food is like. Some of it might make you hungry, like it's going to make me. You will see one woman putting on lipstick in the mirror. That woman is Thai, so she is a Thai person who sells street food for a living, and you'll see her in the video.
Right.
If someone has to taste a real food, authentic food, it has to be street food.
There's a culture of eating outside, drinking outside, hanging out outside. Always like a party going on.
It's a chaotic paradise of food.
It's a portal to a world of culinary heritage. People have been doing the same dish for 40, 50, 60 years. They never went to culinary school.
แม่จะอายุมากแม่จะบอกเด็กเสมอนะเด็กมันจะขี้ลืมร่างกายเด็กยังสู้แม่ไม่ได้ In the city of 10 million people, almost 1 million make a living by selling this. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of sacrifice.
All right, that gives us an idea of what street food might be like in Thailand or in other countries in Asia. And like you heard the woman say in the video, so many people make a living by selling food on the street in places like Thailand. So she said maybe 1 million and about 10 million. That means if you have 10 people, probably one of them, their job is selling food at the street carts. So another thing they have in Thailand that we don't have here in the US is floating markets. Sometimes they'll sell food that's already cooked like in the street food that you saw, but usually it's more like fruit and vegetables. So if you've ever been to a farmer's market in the United States, that's a little bit what the floating markets are like, what they're like, but each seller has their own boat. So they'll just float past. Usually they have some sort of kind of walkway on the sides like you see in that photo, and from there you could buy from them, but all of the vendors are going to have their own boat that carries their fruit and vegetables.
Wait.
So that's all I have to talk about food itself, but I want to teach you guys a few words in Thai when we talk about food. So the first one, how you say food, it's ahan. It's called ahan. So can you guys say that? Good job. So in Thailand, if you're hungry and you want to say I'm hungry, you would say chun hu. Can you say that? Last one is delicious. So sometimes if you're at a restaurant and you have a really good plate and you want to tell them it's delicious, you can say aroy. Can you say aroy? It's really, really good and you want to say it's really delicious, you would say aroy ma. I think you guys would learn Thai really well. I just want to do a little bit of review. Can Miss Barsanti call on somebody who can tell me what flavors are popular in Thai food? Yes, you guys are right. So spicy and sweet foods are really popular in Thailand. You can get them to be spicy with ingredients like chilies that are peppers, but you can also use things like coconut to make them sweet. All right, can anybody tell me what people use to eat their food in Thailand? And forks. All right, can somebody tell me one place where you can buy food in Thailand? Exactly, great job, guys. So you can get food outside a lot of the time. You can get them from the street carts, or you can get them in those floating markets that he just said. All right, and my last question, can you name one food that's popular in Thailand?
Good.
Yeah, I didn't say this earlier, but pineapple is actually also really popular in Thailand. So are bananas. So those are some other fruits that we might eat here that they also eat in Thailand. No. We did see Patsy Ew. I didn't say they had noodles, but they do have noodles. They're a little bit different from the noodles we might normally eat, but they are noodles.
Okay. Okay.
You might add celery in your fried rice. That's a good one. All right, you guys did great. We learned a little bit about Thai food. So now Cynthia is going to teach us a little bit about China and food that might be eaten in China.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I also learned so much about Thai cuisine. So starting off with a little introductory question. What do you guys know about China? So this can be anything. What do you think about? If anyone has anything they want to share about Chinese food or China in general, if Ms. Barsanti wants to call on someone. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm surprised you guys know so much about China already. Okay, quick question. How old do we think China is? The options are 5 years old, 350 years old, and 3,500 years old. So the answer is 3,500 years old. It is actually one of the oldest civilizations, so one of the oldest countries in the entire world. Okay, so our next question is, what continent is China on? So I'll give you a hint. It might be on the same continent as Thailand. Oh, I see people with both hands raised. Correct. Okay, China is in Asia, just like in Thailand. Good job, guys. China is very big. I think it's the 3rd biggest country in the world. So this white thing is Asia here, and then China is that big red thing. And then you can also see Thailand is down there, if you remember where Sarah pointed it out earlier. So they're pretty close together. Okay, and then our final question about China. What famous drink was invented in China? Tea, coffee, or juice? The correct answer is actually tea. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about China, let's look at a few more fun facts. So China is, sorry Liz, you might have to click through, each of the bullets. China's a country with the most people in the entire world. They have 1.4 billion people. So that means out of every 7 people, 1 person is going to be from China. So that's a lot of people there. And then it's a country in Asia, like we learned, and the official language is Chinese. So whoever said Spanish before, unfortunately, it is not Spanish. The official language is Chinese, but they do have a lot of other languages that people speak as well. And then it is one of the oldest civilizations, like we said earlier, 3,500 years old. And finally, their lucky colors are red and yellow. So red symbolizes fire, it symbolizes growth and vitality, and then yellow symbolizes earth. So it symbolizes kind of being grounded, having a family, a home, and those are the 2 colors they can see on their flag. Okay, so now we get to talk about the actual fun stuff, food in China. So first, we're going to talk about what utensils they use. I think you all guessed this. They use chopsticks, and I'm not sure if you can see my face here, but here's some chopsticks that we have in our home. So for the most part, chopsticks are usually made of bamboo or wood or nowadays plastic because it's cheaper. But if you're really rich in ancient China, you could have ones made of jade or ivory or silver. So it'd be really pretty and really fancy to eat with. So chopsticks are really common in East Asian countries. So China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam use chopsticks. And so if you've ever been to like a sushi restaurant, sushi's Japanese, or like you've eaten Chinese takeout, they'll probably give you chopstick. And the reason is because chopsticks are supposed to be good for picking up almost anything. So anything from noodles to, for example, if you can see I picked up a Fruit Loop here, they're supposed to be really good for picking up anything no matter how small it is. And in the past, people used chopsticks because when they had giant pots of really hot food or really hot oil, they could use the chopsticks to reach in and stir it and cook the food without getting burnt by the hot oil or water. And so now a lot of Chinese people mainly use chopsticks both for cooking and for eating. As you can see in this picture, someone is preparing things using chopsticks. And then the other utensil that they use is spoons. So this is called a soup spoon. So it's not like a regular spoon. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit wider because then you can pick up a lot of soup and bring it to your mouth. So the main utensils that we use in China are chopsticks and spoons. And like Sarah said, with Thai food, you don't really use a knife because usually they make the food small enough to pick up with a chopstick. So you won't have like a giant steak that you have to eat with like 2 little sticks. It's usually just small pieces that you can pick up with chopsticks. Okay, so looking at a few staples of Chinese cuisine. So just like in Thailand, rice is really big in China. It's a big part of Chinese food, and it's been grown for thousands of years because it's really easy to grow. It's easy to plant and harvest, so it became really popular, especially when a lot of people were poor in the past, and a lot of them were farmers. It was an easy crop to grow. And even now, rice is eaten at almost every meal. It does depend on what part of China you're from, but for example, my family is from southern China, and we eat rice at almost every single meal. It's always on the table. Chinese people believe that every meal should have an equal division between fan, which means grains and starches, so like a bun or a rice, and then cai, which means fruits and vegetables. So there's always going to be a rice or a bun and then some fruits and veggies, so you have that balance between fan and cai. The next staple is noodles. I'm sure you've all seen Chinese noodles or at least heard of them, but there's a bunch of different variety of noodles in Chinese food. The ones you see here are kind of thicker and flatter, but there's also ones that are really skinny. There's some that are called like glass noodles, and those are made from cellophane. And there are also some that are made from egg flour. So there's a lot of different forms. And long noodles are thought to symbolize a long life. So whenever anyone has a birthday, you have to eat a lot of noodles because you have to show that you're going to have a really long life. So you have to eat a super noodle. And so usually when people make noodles, they don't cut them up. They try to leave them as long as you can to show that you're going to have a super, super long life. And then the last one is tofu, which is also a really important part of Chinese food. It was invented in China about 2,000 years ago, and it's made from soy milk, water, and curd. So what that means is first you make the soy milk from soybeans, and then you have to add something to make it thicken up. So you go from soy milk to something that's kind of thick, kind of like a pudding. Have any of you guys ever had tofu before in any form? Cool. So hopefully you know a little bit about what tofu tastes like and the texture, because there's a lot of different types. You can have tofu that's very soft, kind of like a silky pudding almost, and you can have tofu that's kind of stiff and thicker. And so it tastes a little bit more like the texture of like chicken, for example. And in the past, again, it was pretty popular among people who maybe didn't have that much money a long time ago in China because it's very healthy. And if they couldn't buy meat, at least they could still have tofu. And because tofu doesn't have a flavor by itself, you can add whatever spices or sauces you want to it, and you can make it a bunch of different flavors. So it can be sweet, it can be salty, it can be spicy. You can do sweet and sour. There's a lot of different options. So I think the next one is a short video on someone making tofu from scratch. Unfortunately, it was 2 separate videos, so I think we have to play them separately. But yeah, so this is like an old Chinese grandma, and this is her process of making tofu completely from scratch. I think there's a very light music, so I'm just going to narrate, but she's soaking the beans here to help get the water out, and then she's going to grind up the beans so that she can get all the liquid out. She looks so happy. And then here they're using a fire, and they actually have to blow the fire. It's not automatic. So they're using that fire to kind of thicken up the soy milk. And that helps get all the clumps out of it. So you get this really nice silky soy milk. Okay, and then I think, oh, there's so good. Oh, and then here's when I think this is the curdling part. So she added something like lemon juice or something to make it thicken up. So you see all those little clumps coming out of it. And I think the second part is her actually turning it into tofu. I think the water is boiling hot, but some people, they're not scared of boiling water. So she's just reaching her hands in. And now we have this giant chunk of homemade tofu completely from scratch. And so this is one of the ones that's a little bit firmer, so it's not as silky. And then the dish she's making here is, I think it's mapo tofu. So she's adding a lot of spices, chili powder, chili oil. And yeah, so that is how she makes tofu from scratch. It's very impressive. Yeah, so most of the tofu that you see in the store nowadays, it's commercialized, which means that it's just big companies or big factories making it, but you technically can still make tofu from scratch by yourself. My dad actually really likes making soy milk from scratch. I don't know if he's tried tofu, but if you guys are ever really bored, you can go to your mom and dad and say, hey, let's get some beans and let's make some tofu from scratch. And you can make that completely by yourself, which is super cool. Okay, so the next part of Chinese food we're going to talk about is actually not food, but tea. So tea is a really important part of Chinese cuisine. It was invented in China thousands of years ago. There's a lot of well, we're not completely sure where it comes from, but one story says that a Chinese emperor was sitting under a nice tree thousands of years ago. He was drinking his hot water just for fun, and then some leaves from the tree fell down into his water. And instead of being like, ew, I don't want leaves in my drink, he drank it. And he was like, wait, this is actually super good. And after that, Chinese people started realizing that you can use tea and different leaves from plants to make tea, and that it has a lot of nutritional benefits as well. So it tastes good, and it's really good for your body. And the fun thing is that tea really spread all over the world. So even though tea was found or discovered in China thousands of years ago, you can see tea in almost every country, every continent now. For example, on the right side, if you see that picture of that really pretty little flowery teacup, that's actually tea in Britain, so that's English tea. So even though tea started in China, it spread all over the world, and tea is also a really important part of English culture too. And on the bottom right, we have a drink called bubble tea. Has anyone had bubble tea or heard of it?
Bubble.
Hands? Awesome. Yeah, so bubble tea is also a variation of tea. So to make it, you add milk and a lot of sugar to some tea, and then you add boba at the bottom. Those are those little black circles. They're also called tapioca pearls, and basically they're these squishy, kind of chewy, sweet, they kind of taste like brown sugar, these sweet little chewy balls that you put at the bottom. And so bubble tea is really popular today. Even in America, there are a lot of boba tea places where I live. I actually used to work at one, and so it's really cool to see how tea has kind of spread around the world and how different countries have their own take on tea. For example, if you go to McDonald's and you order a sweet tea, even though that's really different from Chinese tea, ancient Chinese tea, it's the same drink essentially, which is super cool.
Before COVID, Cynthia, my niece that's in middle school, she lives in California, and her and her friends would ride their bikes to a boba tea place every day after school, and they had all sorts of different shapes and flavors, and she took me there when I went to visit. But
yeah, that's awesome.
She really likes it.
I'm sorry, was someone saying something? Yeah, bubble tea is really popular now. Okay, so I'm sorry if I interrupted someone.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about some unique snacks. So things that might seem a little bit weird if you haven't had them, but once you've had them, you're like, wow, how could I have ever not like this? So the first one is a tea egg. So it's just like it sounds. You're going to boil, hard boil an egg, and then you're going to crack it so that there's cracks in the shell, and then you're going to boil it again in tea and other spices, other sauces, and flavorings. And basically when you're done with it, usually it has like kind of a dark brown color, and you'll see those like really pretty marble effects on the shell, or on the outside of the egg. And the taste is kind of like, it's a very fragrant egg, if that makes any sense. So it has like a nice like salty, kind of smoky flavor almost, and it's really delicious. You can eat it for breakfast, or just for fun. Usually I hate just eating hard-boiled eggs, but I'll eat like 5 of these at once. That's how good they are. And the next one is sugar haws. So they're also called tang bulu. And basically they're hawthorn fruits, and they're coated in like a sugar and water coating. So it's crispy on the outside, And then when you bite into it, the middle of the actual fruit, the actual hawthorn, is nice and soft. And it's not actually sweet. It's pretty sour. So personally, I'm not the biggest fan of these, but they're really popular with Chinese kids. And in China, you'll see like a bunch of stalls with them just like sticking out on the street. So that's another classic Chinese dessert. And then the last unique Chinese food that I'm also a little bit hesitant about is stinky tofu. So if you guys remember when Sarah was talking about how stinky durian is, some people say that this is like the rival of durian because of how bad it smells. So basically you take that nice like white tofu that we saw in the earlier one, and then you ferment it in like old milk or sauces or vegetable stock, and then you let it sit there. You can let it sit for a few days, or sometimes people let it sit for up to like 6 months or longer. So afterwards, usually it turns like a darker color or at least like a brown color. And because of all the fermentation, because of all the kind of bacteria that's in there, it smells really, really bad. So just like with durian, you don't really see it being sold in like restaurants and stuff because it smells super bad. So it's mostly a street food. Personally, I don't like stinky tofu, but I have a lot of relatives who really love it, and they say that the stinkier it smells, the better it tastes. So they really love the fact that it absolutely stinks. So moving on from that, some fun breakfast items. So the first staple of breakfast is congee. So this is called, it's a rice porridge. And I know it looks a little bit questionable, but it's actually super delicious. It's really easy to make. I think usually it's just made from boiling some rice with a ton of water. So it's kind of like making oatmeal, if you guys have had oatmeal, and then it thickens into this nice and creamy kind of porridge. So you can eat it with a bunch of different sides. You can have it with like the tea egg that we saw on the earlier slide. You can have it with pork or other meat or some like pickled vegetables. When I was little, I would just like pour sugar into it and just eat it like a sweet rice soup, which totally not a part of Chinese culture, but that's how I would eat it. So that's a staple of breakfast. And then another staple, which is one of my favorite Chinese foods, is soy milk and youtiao. So as we saw earlier, you can make soy milk from scratch. And these two are foods that you'll see a lot like on the street food. So a lot of times street vendors will make this like completely from scratch. You can even watch them making it. And then the youtiao, they're also called Chinese donuts. So kind of like the Thai donuts that Sarah showed us earlier, they're just like fried pieces of dough, super greasy, super delicious, probably not very healthy for you, but they taste so good. And they're kind of crispy and golden on the outside, and on the inside, they're nice and fluffy. And usually people will dip those in soy milk, so you have a little bit of salty and sweet for your breakfast. And then the last one is jianbing, or Chinese crepes. This is also another one of my favorites, and they only sell it on the street, so you can't get it anywhere else because it has to be made fresh. So we're going to watch a little video in a second, but basically it's like an egg crepe, and then you add a bunch of fillings in it. You fold it up all nice, and you cut it in half and serve it fresh. So here's a video of someone making it in Beijing, China. So that's just like the rice flour outside that she's spreading on that griddle right there. And then she's adding in and so she just told the person that, just told the vendor that he wants it spicy. He wants spice on it. And then this is like a salty bean curd, I think, which sounds a little weird, but it's super good. And she's also adding some chili oil and some scallions and other herbs. And then at the end, he said 谢谢, which means thank you. So that's how you make a Chinese jianbing, or crepe. So you'll see a bunch of these little stands just like out on the street or like maybe by your neighborhood. And so there's always a pretty long line, even though it's made really fast, because people always want to eat these, and they're always made fresh, so they're really delicious. Legend says that 2,000 years ago, they were invented when a general noticed that his soldiers were really tired because they didn't have like all their tools to cook with. They're really hungry, so he came up with an idea of something that you could cook on like a flat shield. So apparently people used to make these on the shields because it was nice and flat and you could cook it evenly, which sounds pretty dirty, but they were soldiers, so I'll give them that. So moving on to more traditional food, I'm sure you guys have heard of some of these. So fried rice is also really big in Chinese food, just like in Thai cuisine. Yeah, like Sarah mentioned, usually it's just like pre-cooked rice, and you want to use old rice because then it dries out more. And then you add yummy veggies. You can add meat. I think someone earlier said shrimp fried rice, which that's a very popular type of fried rice in China, so good job. And yeah, it's a very easy dish to make. A lot of times, if you have leftovers from last night, you can just throw everything in the pot and you have yourself some fried rice. And then another popular Chinese dish is dumplings in this top right corner. So dumplings come in a lot of different shapes and forms, but usually you'll see in the top right corner, they're kind of like that long and skinny form. And they look like what Chinese money used to look like. They used to look like kind of like this round, like, I'm not doing a good job with my fingers, but that round kind of like dumpling shape. And they're usually eaten fairly often, but also for New Year's, especially during Chinese New Year. And then this little picture of dumplings is a soup dumpling. So these are really cool because they have like dumpling filling in it. So they have like some meat in it, usually pork or shrimp, I think. And then they also have some soup in it. So how you eat it is you take a little dumpling, you put it on your soup spoon, if you remember the soup spoon from earlier. And then you have to bite a little hole in it with your teeth. So you go nibble, nibble, and you bite a little hole. And then you have to suck all the soup out first. So it's first like you drink the dumpling, and then you actually eat the dumpling. So that's like the traditional way to eat a soup dumpling. You're not supposed to just throw it in your mouth all in one go. You have to drink the soup first and then eat the filling. And then the final one on this slide is baozi, or steamed buns. And so these are soft steamed buns, and they have a bunch of different types of filling on the inside. So I think this one looks like pork and vegetables, but you can also get some that are sweet. So you can get some with a sweet egg custard or a sweet red bean paste. So there's a lot of different fillings that you can get inside baozi. And finally, my favorite desserts. So a traditional staple in Chinese desserts is mooncake. So mooncakes are these round little, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me charge my laptop. So mooncakes are these round little cakes, and they usually have a really pretty design on them. This one is flowers, but sometimes people even stamp words on it, or like a super short poem or like a saying. And they have like a soft kind of buttery outside, and then the filling can be things like red bean paste or lotus bean paste. So it's really rich and really sweet. It's eaten during the Mid-Autumn Festival. So when people are thinking about the moon, when they're looking at the moon. So usually there's going to be an egg yolk inside the mooncake because that represents like the full moon, like a nice little yellow moon inside your mooncake. And then roundness in Chinese culture also symbolizes unity and togetherness. So they're in a round shape because you're supposed to share them with your family. So you're all supposed to be together in this nice little circle, and you're supposed to share the mooncakes with them. And then the next one is egg tarts. So egg tarts are actually from Portugal. So I don't think they originated in China, but they're a really big part of Chinese food, especially in Hong Kong. And egg tarts have this nice buttery flaky crust, and then the inside is a smooth egg custard. So it's really sweet, really delicious. And then the final dessert we're going to talk about today is Chinese rice balls. So I don't know if you guys have had like Japanese mochi, but it's kind of a similar thing. So the outside is made of glutinous rice flour and water, so it's thick and chewy. And then the inside has this delicious filling that oozes out when you bite into it. So it can be sugar, black sesame, osmanthus flowers, sweet bean paste. It's kind of like biting into like a really juicy cloud. So I love those too. And you have to eat them in pairs. At least that's what my family does. So even if you've eaten like 7 and you're completely stuffed, you have to eat another one just to have luck. So that's a fun fact about rice balls. And I think, oh, okay. So really quick, how we say different words in China, just like we learned in Thai. So I'm hungry is 我饿了. Awesome. And then yum is 好吃. You guys sound great. So if you're ever stuck in China or Thailand, at least you'll know how to get some food. Okay. Next, let's do a little review. I know we're a little low on time, but what continent are Thailand and China on? They're both on Asia. You can see both of them in that little picture there. Our next question is, what utensils are used in each country? Perfect. And then the last question is, what is a common food in both countries? So there's 2 different answers to this, or I guess 3, but try to think of anything that you saw in both countries. So
Good job.
I tried rice and donuts, but rice is definitely a big one in both countries. Awesome. And then we can maybe skip the next slide if we're out of time. We can skip that slide. And then the last one, we just wanted to ask you guys, what foods would you like to try from Thailand or China, and what other countries' food would you like to learn more about?
Countries, do you want to learn about the food?
Guys, is there anything anyone wanted to add?
Thank you guys for listening and for participating. You did a great job. You remembered a lot. I think you guys learned a lot about food in China and in Thailand today.